Every 2 years, Siena College Research Institute does a poll of historians, political scientists, think tanks, people, smarty pantses, professors, those folks. They have a very complicated scoring matrix that assesses their effectiveness and how much legislation they got passed and economic factors and like what they inherited and the general zeitgeist at the time and how they're remembered and all those things. They compound all of that information, highly scientific information, and they come up with a ranking every 2 years for America's best president. Today, we're gonna drink like America's worst presidents, because I just took that and sorted Z to A, and now we're gonna do the bottom 11. Let's do it! This is part 2 of a 2-part episode in which I stand on the internet and smack a hornet's nest like an idiot. You can check out part 1 in the link below here, up here in the corner. Before I move on, I want to mention this book right here, Mint Juleps with Teddy Roosevelt by Mark Will Weber, Complete History of Presidential Drinking. The information about what presidents like to drink, it's in this book. So if you want to pick up the research that made this possible, use the link in the pin down below or up here in the corner. We're gonna kick things off with a guy I never thought I'd be nostalgic for. Our honorable mention on our worst presidents list, coming in at number 11, President George W. Bush, old President 43. He liked a non-alcoholic beer. Honestly, if you like a domestic American beer and you want one that doesn't have alcohol in it, O'Doul's is the best game in town, but it's a game I don't want to play. And one important caveat for this episode is that I will not be offering facts or bullet points or opinions on presidents whomst are still alive and whomst deeply affected my own personal life. Coming in at number 10, it's America's 10th worst president, our 12th president, Zachary Taylor, in office March 4th, 1849 to July 9th, 1850. He liked to drink whiskey. By the way, a lot of these guys like to drink whiskey. He liked to have a wiki. Let's pour a little wiki for old Dickie Taylor. I don't know why I called him Dickie Taylor. There's a fort in Key West named Zachary Taylor. Hot dog, that's a fucking good. I like that. That's a spicy whiskey. For all of these guys, I put together some facts about why they're regarded as so awful. But also, some of these facts, you might be like, well, that's just a fact. That's just information. Some of these facts, you might be like, actually, I think that's an okay thing. So it's gonna be a little bit of both. You can decide how bad they are. Anyway, this fucking guy over here, Zachary Taylor, he was the last president born before the adoption of the Constitution. Can't help that. Honestly, I don't know, it's just on my list. As a general, he led U.S. forces against Mexico in the annexation of Texas. He was regarded as a fearless and effective soldier. Basically, though, he was a weak president, like as a point of philosophy. He thought the only role of a president should be to veto legislation that he thought was unconstitutional. He just thought that his job was to be also the Supreme Court. His philosophical goal was to effect and direct no policy. He wanted to achieve nothing. Probably his greatest sin as president, though, was to die, because the one policy he did kind of have was he opposed the 1850 Compromise and he supported the admission of Western states as free states. By dying, he made Millard Fillmore president, which sets in motion the 1850 Compromise and Bleeding Kansas. Some historians think that had Zachary Taylor lived, that slavery may have been stamped out without a civil war. And perhaps the most fun thing about Zachary Taylor, he died from eating too many cherries. Basically, he died of a super duper upset stomach. They called it cholera morbus. That's just 1800s talk for the bad belly. They didn't know what the hell he had. We probably still don't know what he had. It might have actually been cholera, because water was bad back then. I was gonna say it's like hypothetically possible that, he might have died from like cyanide poisoning from eating all those cherry pits, but I'm pretty sure that we dug up his bones and checked them, and there wasn't no cyanide in there. That's fucking cool whiskey, man. That's like, American Single Malt. This is a very scotchy American whiskey. I like it. Here he is, your 9th worst president, America's 31st president in office, March 4th, 1929 to March 4th, 1933. It's Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover supposedly liked martinis. Also, supposedly, when Prohibition came in, his wife dumped all of his wine. I doubt that. I think that's some fucking bullshit. But we're gonna make a martini for him. Looking up Herbert Hoover, woohoo, this was an eye-opener. I knew he was not great, but I didn't know how not great he was. And you're about to know how not great he was, too. We're gonna have to have a tall glass of gin for old Herbie. We're gonna pour 3 ounces of Ford's gin. I wanted to try this vermouth, Balduria vermouth. I have not actually had a chance to try Balduria vermouth. It was sent to me by Curiata. You could buy all the bottles I use on the show at drink.curiata.com. They have a whole how to drink collection there. It's very cool. They will ship it straight to your front door, which is also very cool because going out sucks. And I have yet to try this. This is pretty exciting. I usually do my martinis 2 to 1. Should I do a 2 to 1? Yeah, what the hell? Let's do another 2 to 1. That's like the classic ratio. You can do 3 to 1 too. When I say classic, I mean like pre-prohibition, which is probably how Herbert Hoover was drinking his martinis. A couple dashes of orange bitters. Some ice in there. Bang, bang. Put that in a glass. You put martinis in a glass. Bloop. There it goes. I'm doing some weird stuff because I don't have all the tools I usually have. I'm going to zest some lemon in here. I usually like some lemon. I'm gonna zest it around it. I'm gonna spray some lemon oil over the glass. That's what I'm gonna do. There's some zest in there too, whatever. It's fine. I normally do martinis with a twist of lemon. I know that historically that's the way it should be done. I don't really love olives in my drink. Whatever. And you knew what you were then. I like that Baldoria. So, forestal. Oh, what is that? There are some fun notes in there. What is that? Ah, cedar, like cedar notes. Definitely something in the vein of cedar. I really like that. That's fantastic. It's too good for Herbert Hoover, because wait till you hear about this guy. Supposedly, he liked martinis even though he supported prohibition ardently, because he was a fucking hypocrite. Let me read you down about the Herbert Hoover town. He's, what the fuck is wrong with me? All right, I'm using my mouse, so you have to cope. He was Secretary of Commerce under Harding and Coolidge, very popular for Secretary of Commerce job. He avoided being embroiled in Harding's many scandals by being too much of a fucking nerd to hang with his gangster buddies. They literally didn't like having him around. They were playing poker in the White House. He went to one game, he made him uncomfortable. He thought it was uncouth to play poker in the White House. They didn't hang out. They didn't associate. They didn't like each other. He took office, became president in 1929. Which was bad timing, because the stock market imploded and plunged his entire presidency into the Great Depression. However, not bad timing. Don't forget, he had been Secretary of Commerce through the previous 2 administrations, so I think he was reaping what he hath sown. Best goddamn martini I've ever had in my life. He thought the federal government should have little to no input on how to recover from the Great Depression. He opposed federal relief, i.e. unemployment or welfare, feeling instead that if the states wanted to establish the systems they could, or those people could just go rely on charity. Just go find some charity from the other poor people. You're poor, go find some other poor people and get them to give you some poor person money. Go for it. He thought that unemployment payments would foster laziness. Where have I heard that before? Jesus Christ. Here we go. We're really getting into the hot stuff now on Herbert Hoover. 1930, he signs the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act into law, which raises tariffs across the board on a ton of goods to the second highest levels in U.S. history. Economists and historians very broadly agree, bizarro outliers aside, that the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was a disaster of a policy executed at the worst possible moment and deepened and lengthened the Great Depression. Oops. While banks are collapsing and left and right, and countries around the world are moving off of the gold standard, wisely, Herbert refused, clung onto that gold. In response to the collapse of the German economy, and please do not confuse this with the short period of hyperinflation in 1923, in response to the German economy's collapse, Herbert offered them a year off of making payments on their war reparations. I gotta tell you, at this particular moment, I am reading Weimar Germany, Tragedy and Promise, I think probably, sort of the de facto textbook on the time, place, and events. And I gotta say, Herbie Hoovy baby, you done fucked up. I think if you just dug a little deeper and done a little bit better than a year off, things might have turned out a little different. I think they might have worked. I don't know, Herbert. I think I can lay a lot of shit at your feet. Finally, in 1932, Hoover kicks his ass into gear. Unemployment is at a staggering 23%. That's the official number. That's not like the real number. Hoover decides that the federal government can intervene in the economy, and he creates the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which provided government-secured loans to banks, railroads, local governments, and other things too big to fail. As usual, supply-side economic relief failed to do much fucking good at all, and he still refused to back any direct relief to the unemployed and desperate, who now had a whole new lingo. Hooverville, a ramshackle shantytown built on the outskirts of towns out of cardboard and scrap metal, or In one case, right in the middle of Central Park, New York City, a Hoover blanket, a newspaper used as a blanket, Hoover leather, cardboard stuck into your shoes to cover the holes that you'd worn through them. One great thing about Herbert Hoover is, like, without him, like, so many of my favorite movies never would have been made. Some of my favorite movies are pre-code era movies about the Great Depression. Those are the best movies. Thanks, Hoover. Thank you for all the great movies. Hey, did you know that he also managed to raise taxes while all this was going on? Batting 1,000 here, Hoovy baby. In a super classy move, he opposed the federal anti-lynching law. He also pursued a policy of blaming Mexican Americans for the Depression, and he embarked on a policy of Mexican repatriation, which resulted in about 1 million Mexican Americans being repatriated by force to Mexico. About 60% of those people were, in fact, American citizens. All right. Cool. Herbert Hoover, class act, baby. He loved Prohibition. He resisted all efforts to repeal it. He commissioned something called the Wickersham Commission, thinking it was going to prove that Prohibition was awesome and working and great. And then they came back and said, actually, boss, Prohibition is just making everything worse, and it has led to a culture of extremely violent, very organized crime. Hoover said, but you're wrong. I was writing my Hoover notes and I was just like, wow, oh wow. And like, I'm looking at my prompter here and it's like every page, I'm just like, oh no, this was my favorite. This is my favorite. My favorite. He presided over the bonus army nightmare of 1932, dispatching General Douglas MacArthur to disperse thousands of American World War I veterans who had shown up in DC looking for a little bit of help. MacArthur, famously prone to restraint, decided to use cavalry, tanks, and mustard gas to drive the ailing vets out of DC and into the hinterlands. Yeah, so, just like full background on that. World War I veterans at the end of World War I were said, hey, we're gonna pay you a bonus for your war service in like X years. Basically, imagine having like a bond that matures at some time, right? Depression hits, these guys are starving and hungry. They start a movement of riding the rails from around the country to assemble in DC and say, can we have that now, please? The government said no. They said, okay, well, we're not gonna leave until we can have that now, please. And then Hoover said, MacArthur, do your worst. And there you go. In regards to all of this, you should, I think, watch Gold Diggers of 33, perhaps one of my favorite movies, top 5 movies, maybe my favorite pre-code movie, or top 5 pre-code movies for sure. It's a great introduction to pre-code cinema. It's a lot of fun. The dialogue is snappy. Everybody in it is just like smart, light on their feet, and awesome. Also, it's a great musical. It closes on this big number, Remember My Forgotten Man, which is being performed like as the bonus army is yesterday's headlines, literally like earlier that year, right? That's when they were recording that. So, oh, check this out. Hoover lost his bid for re-election with only 52 electoral votes to 472, carrying 6 states. What was wrong with those 6 states? What was wrong with you? How'd that happen? Okay, that's enough on Hoover. Let's move on to your 8th worst president. July 9th, 1850 to March 4th, 1853, president number 13, Millard Fillmore. Millard Fillmore liked to drink Madeira. Madeira is actually pretty cool stuff. It's a sweet kind of dessert wine. I enjoy a bit now and again. Have a little Madeira. Don't mind if I do. I'm gonna have a terrible headache tonight. God, that's tasty. This is just delicious. Sandeman, fine, rich Madeira from Portugal. It's not port, it's Madeira, because it comes from an island off the coast of Port. I think that's where Madeira is. Anyway, on best presidents, every 5 seconds, I was like, hey, remember, this is the objective truth as per the Siena College Research Institute's polling of historians and political scientists and the like. These are facts. You can't argue with them. I don't feel that way right now because these guys are like, long time ago. I don't think anybody gives a shit about Millard Fillmore. Millard Fillmore stands in the comments right now. Oh, he's talking about Fillmore. He doesn't even know. He gets a bad rap. Millard Fillmore's one great presidents. I don't think that you're out. If you're out there, thank you for existing. All right, Millard Fillmore. He's the last Whig president, last president who was neither a Democrat nor a Republican. So we mentioned in Zachary Taylor that his worst sin was dying because it paved the way for Millard Fillmore. Well, Millard Fillmore was Zachary Taylor's vice president, and so he becomes president when Taylor dies. While Taylor was alive, the 1850 Compromise was being debated in Congress. The Compromise was a package of bills, including the Fugitive Slave Law, that was designed to appease the wishes of slave states. Now, Taylor opposed the compromise entirely, but Fillmore, who as vice president would be the tie-breaking vote, told Taylor that if it comes to a tie-breaking vote, I'm supporting the compromise. Uh-oh. We have a little problem here in my house. Well, then Taylor ate too many cherries, and Millard Fillmore became president and got a chance to support the living hell out of the 1850 compromise and sign it all into law. That's not good, because that led to the Civil War. Let's just leave it there. This is an interesting one. He was president during Narciso Lopez's filibustering into Cuba. Now, here's the thing about filibustering. You might think it's when you stand up in Congress and talk about Star Wars for 30 hours. Historically, it was a military term. It's when a private citizen decides to raise their own army and conquer another country for the purpose of annexing that land into their home country. William Walker attempted this in Central America. Narciso attempted this in Cuba. It failed, and on the second time of its failing, it ended in his capture and execution. Weirdly, Cuba adopted his flag, though. They're just like, man, that's a pretty cool flag. Let's use that. The fact that this was going on while he was in office was a very bad look because filibustering was not a thing people liked. People thought that was not cool. It was impolite. It was not gentlemanly. It was fucking lame. It made you look like a big dork. Don't go around filibustering in Cuba. It's not cool. Anyway, filibustering, total lack of control over things, Fugitive Slave Act. Millard Fillmore, he was number 8. Let's move on. Here he is, your 7th worst president. In office April 4th, 1841 to March 4th, 1845, president number 10, John Tyler. Come on down. You're the next contestant on America's Worst President. John Tyler liked to drink champagne. I sabered a bottle for whoever likes champagne on the best presidents. I forget who that was now, but he was one of the best presidents. I'm not gonna do that now because I actually cut my hand on that. This guy just gets a regular old pour. Rink-a-dink-a-dink-a-tang. One thing about champagne is, do you know that you don't have to drink it as it is? You can make it into a champagne cocktail. You can put a little Ango and some Simple in there, or a little spritz of absinthe, any of those things. Believe it or not, all of those things have left the bar because I was making tiki drinks for myself the other night, and they're all in my kitchen. Anyway, here's to you, John Tyler, America's worst seventh worst president. Moe. Here's what you gotta know about John Tyler. He was vice president to William Henry Harrison, who died 1 month into office. 1 month into office. John Tyler becomes president. Actually, what's really interesting to me is that they didn't know that's what was gonna happen. They didn't know. They didn't know that the vice president was just gonna become president. John Tyler set that up. He was like, nah, I'm the president now. And that became president. Tyler had a feud going, long-standing, with Senator Henry Clay. They both wanted to be head of the Whig Party, and Clay got nominated head of the party. Tyler didn't. Tyler got to be vice president. Now, the thing is, he was vice president of this guy, Harrison, and Clay had filled Harrison's cabinet with his guys. His whole plan was to be the power behind the throne and influence Harrison and really kind of be a secret president. And so Harrison died. And now there's a big issue because Clay has invested all of this effort into creating Harrison's cabinet to run the presidency. And this guy Tyler's like, I'm vice president, now I'm the president. And there was a showdown there. Tyler won. Tyler refused to play ball with Harrison. As a result of that, Harrison instructed Tyler's cabinet to resign. They all resigned. He got kicked out of his own party. He was the first president to have his veto overridden by Congress. He was the first president that they tried to impeach, but they couldn't make it into the Senate, didn't get it out of Congress. These are my notes. If he'd only run an ineffective presidency and been an enemy to his own party because he got kicked out of it, and because he had all of this infighting with Clay and the situation with the cabinet, and they called him his accidency, by the way, which I think is interesting. If he'd only been ineffective, he'd probably be regarded as like a middle president, most well known for pushing for the annexation of Texas. However, when the South seceded, he sided with the Confederacy and ran for the Confederate Congress and won and held office in the Confederacy. Now, all this happened after he was president. He is the only president to, officially, commit treason against the United States of America, and thus he makes the list. He's technically America's only treasonous president. So, here's to you, Tyler. Fuck you. The South will not rise again. Yeah, he held office in the Confederacy. This brings us to your 6th worst president, America's 9th president in office March 4th, 1841 to April 4th, 1841. Wait a minute, that doesn't sound like a long time. That's right, of course, I'm talking about William Henry Harrison, the man who was president for a month. You know, he was Tyler's president, and that's how Tyler became vice president. Now, in real life, William Henry Harrison drank tea. He was a teetotaler. However, he is very strongly associated with hard cider. And he gave it out while campaigning, which I don't think is legal now. I don't think he can say, "You gonna vote for me? All right, have a drink." But you could, and they did. That's pretty good cider, man. Citizen cider, I'm liking this. Made in Vermont. That's a good cider, Mr. William Henry Harrison. You have my vote. Hell you do. Known as Old Tippecanoe, and there you get the campaign slogan, Tippecanoe and Tyler too. So he had ran originally in 1836 with 3 other Whig candidates in an effort to somehow beat Martin Van Buren in the Electoral College. Let me explain this again. The Whigs ran 4 candidates that year. Not 1, 4. Following? Democrats ran 1 guy, Van Buren. 1 guy, 4 guys. They don't get to pool their votes. That's not how that works. This is a strategy that I can only assume was based on mercury poisoning. He lost. They all lost. Obviously, Martin Van Buren was president. The Van Buren boys.
Hey, now they're tough cookies.
In 1840, he ran alone against Van Buren. They're catching on here. And was characterized by the Van Buren campaign as being a provincial who'd rather sit in his log cabin drinking hard cider than actually run a whole country. In response, and I think this is pretty awesome, old Tippecanoe adopted the log cabin as his icon and handed out free hard cider at campaign events. People like booze, so he won. The idea that he was a provincial who couldn't be president, that's going to come back right now. Harrison was inaugurated on March 4th, 1841. He wanted to put to bed this idea that he was old and simple-minded. So to demonstrate how educated and robust he was, he delivered the longest inauguration speech in history, speaking for nearly 2 straight hours. He did all of this outdoors and without a coat, in the rain, in the cold, March. He rode around on a horse in the rain without a coat. And then he stood for 3 more hours in the rain without a coat in a receiving line. I think it's in like Sense Accessibility. Back then, you got caught in the rain, I'm pretty sure you just died, right? Like, didn't that happen in Sense Accessibility, or is that the other one? It's one of her books. You just like, uh-oh, they're caught in the rain, they're gonna die. This guy's really tempting fate. So he kept up this no coat, all rain business for the next month, and promptly died from it only 31 days after being sworn in, after a solid course of bloodletting, laudanum, opium, camphor, laxatives, brandy, and apparently something called mustard plaster. They probably did that thing where they shoved actual smoke up his butt too. That was an actual thing, you know? Blowing smoke up your ass, that's what they used to do. They had a funnel, and the doctor would blow smoke up your butt. Not even that long ago. I bet Harrison had smoke straight up his butt. Anyway, that paved the way for his vice president, John Tyler, who also makes the list. These guys travel in packs. You may notice these bad presidents, they move together. They move together. Oh, we're really getting up high on the stink pile now. I want to point out, I really feel like Herbert Hoover. I think that if we never had a civil war, because most of these guys their primary guilt is somehow they did something that either led to or didn't prevent the Civil War. Honestly, like that's what most of these guys are on the list for. That's just the way it shakes out. I think if we never had a Civil War, Hoover would be number 1. I can't believe how low he is on the list. That guy fucking sucked. We're in the backstretch now, the top 5. Your 5th worst president, president number 14, in office March 4th, 1853 to March 4th, 1857, Franklin Pierce. Come on now. This is written in all capital letters. America's drunkest president. Died of cirrhosis at 65, drank everything. I noted that I should pour him a little whiskey. Okay. Right now, there are some angry people in the comments saying I shouldn't be making jokes about America's drunkest president. Guys, this is a show. This is not my life. I turn off the cameras and I'm a different fella. So many vanilla notes in that. He is reported to have once said upon leaving office, "What can an ex-president of the United States do except get drunk?" Look, in all fairness to this guy, his life was haunted by repeated horrific tragedies. All of his children died, first in infancy, then from typhus, and then finally in a train derailment. He had like some Final Destination shit going on with his kids. He sought the annexation of Cuba. Again, we're back to the filibustering in Cuba. Apparently this seemed like an absurd idea to his contemporaries, like really absurd. That's coming up and more. He supported the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which nullified the Missouri Compromise, which had been keeping a balance between the admission of slave and free states. Nullifying the Missouri Compromise was a major factor that fanned the flames of the Civil War. This led to what is called Bleeding Kansas, which was essentially your history teacher in high school probably called it a dress rehearsal for the Civil War. It was a civil war. It was a small civil war happening in Kansas. It was a war. It was war. He was a fan of the Ostend Manifesto, which was a plan to buy Cuba from Spain. And if Spain refused to sell it, then we'll take it by force. That sounds so familiar. What the fuck? It's just weird. What is that? What is that sound I keep hearing? Cuba, Cuba. So it's important to note that the reason for wanting Cuba was because it would, of course, have been admitted into the Union as a slave state, which would solidify the institution of slavery further. You may be asking yourself, where is my Cuba? You may ask yourself, where is my filibuster? You may look around and you may say, how did I get here? As the presidents go by, water going underground, and the presidents keep dying, water underground. No, but you may be asking yourself, why Cuba? Why are these guys wanting Cuba so bad? Why do all these guys want Cuba so bad? Because Cuba had a lot of slaves, and what they wanted was another slave state. And so the whole reason he wanted to annex Cuba was to admit another slave state into the Union. That would have really solidified the whole slavery issue in the United States. It would have really thrown the balance. This idea of annexing Cuba was considered preposterous and offensive to the North and apparently all of Europe. They brought this to Spain and they got laughed out of the fucking place. He had no vice president, none. This guy was just presidenting without a net. William R. King, his vice, died about a month into their term, and the post was never filled. And actually, interestingly, I don't know that we know how to do that. I don't know that any precedent has ever been set about what you do when a vice president dies. I think we still don't know how to replace a vice president. Do we? I don't know. Let's keep this presidential shit show rolling right on downhill to your fourth worst president in office, March 4th, 1921 to August 2nd, 1923, your 29th president, Warren G. Harding. So I was looking for some facts on this guy, and the first one I stumbled into is that during Prohibition, he was taking all the seized booze that the Justice Department had been seizing, and he served it in the White House. All right, maybe we're judging this guy a little harsh here. Hold on a second. He was the first sitting senator to be elected president. He opposed the creation of a bonus for World War I veterans. So I mentioned before, the bonus army, they wanted to collect on the bonus. This guy, way back during the war, said, we don't want to have a bonus. No bonus. Fuck the troops usually works really well politically. I don't know. I put it in my notes just because I thought it was, that's weird. He commuted the sentence of Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs, if you don't know, is like an anarchist and ardent pacifist, and he got thrown into jail for being against the First World War, U.S. involvement. He commuted his sentence. It's interesting too, is that the idea of what the First Amendment meant was changing at this time. I just listened to a whole fucking podcast about this, American History Tellers. What it meant fundamentally changed after Woodrow Wilson, during and after his presidency. It actually, the idea that you have a right to free speech was like a new idea, new interpretation, so to speak. An activist judge. Truly, actually. So the thing with Harding is that actually as president, he really wasn't that bad, apparently. He's largely remembered and reviled for scandals that would only come to light after his death. So while he was president, he seemed to be pretty well liked. After he died, all this other shit came out and we were like, oh my God, this guy sucked. He was a Chicago politician and he appointed friends and acquaintances to federal positions, seemingly without any concern to their qualifications whatsoever. Where have I heard that before? What is that sound? What is that? Jesus. Sorry. Fuck, man. Give me some cider. Gee, I need some whiskey. Put some whiskey in your cider, some water in your tea. What's all these questions you're asking me? Yeah, seemingly without any concern to their qualifications. Some of them actually did just coincidentally align up with their posts and were very capable, by coincidence. Others were just incredibly corrupt and became known as the Ohio Gang, which literally, I've listened to an entire podcast about the Ohio Gang. It's a long tale. We're not gonna do it here. We don't have the time for that. Suffice to say, there was a lot of corruption going on. One of which was the Teapot Dome scandal. That happened while on his watch. Also, Teapot Dome. Really big story, too much for this episode. But the quick version of it is that there was a bunch of land over here that had oil under it, and they said, hey, that's for the Navy, don't touch that. When the Navy needs that oil, they're gonna get it out of there. And these dudes sold it. They're just like, hey, let's just sell that illegally. Just fucking do it. That's Teapot Dome. As I was mentioning about the Ohio Gang, those are the dudes that wouldn't play poker with Herbert Hoover. That's what I'm saying, these guys are all connected. The bad ones, I don't know, they come in packs for the most part. As we come into this next president, I want to point out that these are all objective facts, not my opinions, certainly, but these are the objective facts as determined by the Siena College Institute's research poll on presidential greatness and effectiveness and all of that of learned people, historians, political scientists, professors. You know, these are people who really know what they're talking about. And I just want to lay that out there before we get to your third worst president. In office January 20th, 2017 to January 2021, and again January 20th, 2025 to God knows when. President 45 and 47, Donald J. Trump, come on down. Yeah, he likes Diet Coke. That's not a joke. He's a Diet Coke guy. And when you combine it with a mouthful of cider, it starts to taste like M&Ms. I don't like that. I used to work at the Taj Mahal. I could tell you some stories. But I won't, because as I said, I will not be offering commentary on presidents who are alive right now and affecting my life and your life and everybody's life every fucking day. No comment. Objective facts. Just objectivity here. Thanks to the Siena College Institute research poll. Let's move on. The time has come for your second worst president of all time. In office March 4th, 1857 to March 4th, 1861, your 15th President James Buchanan. Come on down. James Buchanan the Cannon likes to get fucked up. He drank 10 gallons of Madeira and sherry a week. That seems like a lot. I got some Madeira. Oh wait, I wanted to try the sherry on its own. This is a medium dry blend of Amontillados. It's pretty nice. I wonder how it is when you mix them. He did drink 10 gallons a week. This is gonna be headache juice. Sherry and Madeira get in a fight, Madeira wins. You can't taste anything but the Madeira. Like seriously, drinking 10 gallons that way is so sweet. I don't have a picture of him in front of me. I wonder if James Buchanan must have been in terrible health. Terrible health. I want to know what this guy looked like. What did he look like? I'm looking at John Tyler. Most of these guys, much like John Tyler, they look like they should be one of the portraits in the Haunted Mansion. Let's see, what did James Buchanan look like? Buchanan. Oh yeah. No, dude. That guy looks fucked up. Oh yeah, man. Bukey. I bet they called him that. I bet they did. Oh my God. James Buchanan, what a scumbag. So, prior to becoming president, he engaged in a lengthy campaign to influence 5 of the justices on the Supreme Court to decide against Dred Scott in favor of slavery. He was so passionate about that he actively campaigned before he was even president. And this is my favorite part of that. He thought, I will be the president to end the slavery question. Because when the Supreme Court decides against Mr. Dred Scott and returns him into bondage, surely the American people, both North and South alike, will agree objectively that this is the law of the land, and that will settle the issue. And then I can govern as president without this cloud of the question of slavery hanging over my head. Yes. All I have to do is convince the Supreme Court to make the worst decision in its history. Yes, and then the people will love me for it. Yes. Wow. You know, one thing, guys, you read about these guys, and I want to tell you something. I don't want this to all be a downer. Yes, you are smart enough to be president. You are. I don't care who you are. You could do it. I'm pretty sure you'd be fine. I think you'd be okay at it. Probably, you couldn't be worse than our worst. How's that sound, right? You might not be a great president. Hell, you might not even be good, but I bet you wouldn't be our worst, or even our second worst. Yeah, it takes all stripes. Anybody really can be president. Back to Mr. James Buchanan. He allowed Kansas to join the country as a slave state. Is a big problem. That is basically we're gonna do a civil war now. He backed the Corwin Amendment, which would have made it illegal for the federal government to outlaw slavery. So now here's the thing. I was reading about him, and it sounded like he was just sort of a strict constructionalist. Like he was like, I don't understand the problem. I may or may not agree with the practice, but obviously the law is the law. Why don't these people just see the law and get over it? I don't think he was all that unbiased on the issue. When I read some of this stuff, I think he may have had an ulterior motive. I think he did. So he backed the Corwin Amendment, which would have made it physically illegal for the federal government to outlaw slavery. He allowed Kansas to enter the Union as a slave state. Let me put it this way. if you read this list, if you go through the whole shebang of everything this guy did, it seems like at every turn, there was an option to do this thing that would make it more likely to have a civil war, or that thing which would make it less likely to have a civil war. He did that thing. He did the more likely thing. And he also utterly failed to prepare for it militarily. He didn't even do that. But that pales in comparison to the legacy left by America's worst president. In office April 15th, 1865 to March 4th, 1869, your 17th president, Mr. Andrew Johnson. Come on down. Andrew Johnson is a very drunk fella. Very drunk. In fact, I have heard he could usually not even stand up. Here we go. Mr. Andrew Johnson, fuck you. He took office upon the assassination of Lincoln. So, okay, look, a tough act to follow. And he had been vice president for only 6 weeks, as Lincoln had chosen a new running mate when he ran for re-election. He was from the opposing party. So Lincoln was a Republican, and Andrew Johnson was a Democrat. And right now, angry people in the comments, see, I told you the Democrats are the racist. Yeah, listen, it was a long time ago. Things have changed. That's historical fact. Read LBJ, see LBJ. Yeah, so Lincoln had this weird quirk that he thought like his vice president should be from the other party and that his cabinet should all be people who didn't like him and disagreed with him. They've written books about it. It seems like a bad idea because it is. You may be thinking that like early in the presidency, well, the vice president was the runner-up, so of course they were from the opposite party. We weren't doing that at this point. That was long gone. Lincoln was just odd. He was just kind of crazy. Great, but crazy. As a result, though, when Lincoln died, the whole country got the exact opposite president that they had voted for. He attempted to form his own party, the National Union Party. Nobody liked him or it, so it didn't happen. He basically got into office and immediately set about sabotaging Reconstruction. He canceled any protections for freed slaves. He offered amnesty for all Confederate traitors, save the very highest levels of command, and took every possible action to pave the way for the Black Codes and the Jim Crow South. I think by and large, you can probably lay just about every bad thing that's happened in America since the Civil War at this asshole's feet. Yeah, okay, so he could be number 1. I would put Hoover up at number 2 though, or 3. Hoover, 8, 9, whatever he was, way too low. Hey, by the way, Andrew Johnson, first president to be impeached. He didn't get convicted though and thrown out, but he was impeached. All right, so this was a 2-parter. I started out with America's best presidents, objective facts, and I did America's worst presidents, objective facts. If you're interested in the drinking habits of all the presidents in between, and also the details that I did not include here, check out this book, Mint Juleps with Teddy Roosevelt. There'll be a link down there in the comment. If you have any complaints about this or the previous episode, go ahead and put them in the suggestion box. I'm sure I'll read them at some point. Until then, I will see you next time on another episode of HTD. Hopefully you come back. Guys, it's just show. It's just video. It's just YouTube. It's just TV. We're just having fun here. I will see you next time in another episode of HTD. Good night. Good luck. Lord knows we all need it.